Welcome to the Artist Advisory Hotline, the podcast for artists who want valuable guidance and honest answers on how to grow their careers and develop their new project from leading art world experts and artists. Here's your host and founder of the Artist Advisory, Marina Press Granger. Tune in as she gets you the answers you deserve.
Hello, hotties. I'm your host, Marina Granger, and today on the hotline, we have an incredible artist who is also a really talented mentor to artists and has written this really incredible book called Become a Good, No Great Artist. This is Kristy Gordon, and I am so delighted to have her back on this podcast. She's been on this podcast before. And one of the most incredible things that she does now, yeah, she is a really talented painter. She's very much connected to spirituality and oftentimes channels the information that she gets from her guides into her paintings, which is really, really wonderful. But what's really cool about Kristy is she has developed a method for you to keep your creative juices flowing so that you could become that great artist. And that method is in this book, and it comes with 13 weeks of exercises that you get to do. She's going to talk about some of this in our interview, but I also want to tell you that I'm so honored that Kristy has included my elevator pitch formula in this book as well. Now, why is this so special and how did she get to know it? Well, she invited me as a guest expert into one of her programs, and I came on and gave this talk about the importance of the elevator pitch. I'm sure a lot of you have heard me talk about this, and it's a formula that I came up with after having to introduce artists really quick in art fair settings and gallery settings, having only 2 minutes to get the artist to be remembered, right? And one of the beautiful things about this formula is that instead of saying, well, this is a landscape artist, or you could say, well, I'm a landscape artist, or I do abstracts, right? One of the most beautiful things about this formula is if you say, hey, I'm a landscape artist, or I do abstracts, people are just going to think about the last abstract painter or landscape painter that they remember, and they're going to assume your work's like that. But your work's not like that. Your work is truly unique. And we're natural storytellers. So that's how we keep it going. We think of a story to tell along with this. Now, this is the elevator pitch formula. Tell people why you do what you do or what you're interested in, then how your perspective informs your work. So that is essentially how maybe your experience has affected how you view what you're interested in, right? This makes you the expert, and it becomes a really wonderful talking point. And then you can tell people what you do. So this elevator pitch formula is in Kristy's book. We're going to talk about it also in the interview. But before we dive in, I want to invite you to a really fancy art party that I am so excited to be on the host committee for. So there's this incredible organization called Bolster Arts, which basically is there to help artists in their art career, to give them that little bolster to their art career. And the way that it does this is through a 3.5 month residency in New York City. You get a residency, like a studio that's all paid for, and you get a 2-person show at All Street Gallery at the end. And on top of that, you get to be connected to so many amazing people in the art world while you're part of this residency and doing these things. You may have already applied for it. This year's applications are already closed, But Bolster Arts is an ongoing organization, right? It's doing so many things, and it's so great to start building those connections right now. So, if you're interested in being a part of this in any way, I will put the link in the show notes for you. But there is a party to benefit Bolster Arts. It is on Wednesday, November 20th at All Street Galleries, Hester Street location, and you can get 10% off, I think, with the code Marina at checkout. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in the show notes, and I hope to see you at this party. It will be so fun. And on top of that, I want to say congratulations to Lydia Nobles, who came up with this organization, put this all together. And I'm just so inspired by everything she has done. So, congratulations to you, Lydia. And I cannot wait to see what happens. And I cannot wait for Wednesday night's party. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kristy Gordon and our interview together. So I'll see you in there. Hi, Kristy. Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you back again on the hotline.
Thanks, Marina. It's so good to be here.
I am over the moon about your book that we're going to talk about today. So, you just have published a book called How to Become a Great Artist. And for those of you who are listening, on the cover, it says How to Become a Good, and it gets crossed out, and then you see Great Artist, right? Because why be good when you can be great?
Exactly. Yes.
So, Kristy, the subtitle of the book is Gain Confidence in Your Art, Find Your Creative Voice, and Launch a Thriving Career. And that's definitely something that you have done yourself, and you have guided hundreds of artists in how to do this as well, if not thousands. And that is why I love to hang out with you, because I love to talk to you about all of this stuff. And it's such a pleasure to have you here on the podcast so that everyone else can listen to this conversation. So, I want to ask you, because intention is such a big part of everything that I do, and it's, like my middle name. I want to ask you, what was your intention behind writing this book? Why did you do it?
Well, that is very interesting because, in fact, I have loosely had like a vision board for over 20 years and stuff. And probably about 15 years ago, I started putting on that vision board that I wanted to write a spiritual book about being an artist. So it was just sitting there on my vision board for like 15 years. And sometimes I took a bit of action towards it actually, but never that much. And then out of nowhere, someone wrote to me on Instagram and was like, hey, I'm the editor for like a book publishing company, would you be interested in hopping on a call? And I almost thought it was a joke. Like I almost couldn't believe it was really happening, but I was like, well, I've always had this, on my vision board, so sure, I'll hop on a call with you. And because I had it on the vision board, I sort of knew loosely what I wanted to write about, which was like the sort of spiritual side of being an artist, like the creative process from a spiritual perspective. And so when they started to talk to me, they really wanted more of a how-to guide, like how to paint the eyes, nose, and mouth, for example. But I kind of knew what I really wanted was to write this book. So I kind of pitched it to them and they said yes, and one step led to another.
I love it. And as I flip through the book, and one thing that in one way in which like spirituality comes up is also knowing your inner guidance. And a lot of that inner guidance overlaps with mindset, which goes into these like limiting beliefs that we tend to inherit as artists, as creatives. So, what are some of those limiting beliefs that you dispel in this book?
Yes, well, I guess it's probable that every artist has potentially slightly different limiting beliefs, but there's a whole chapter about how to like kind of identify your limiting beliefs and overcome them. So you write out a positive affirmation about yourself as an artist, like multiple times, and then write down your first kind of contradictory thought like that comes to mind. So I think when I wrote down like I'm a talented, artist and my work is meaningful and creating an impact on the world, I would get something like as if, dream on, all these like mean, like you're a fake sort of like ideas. And so pinpointing like those and realizing that they probably came from somewhere and just making them conscious, helped me like realize why it had become so hard to paint, because in this background of my mind, those were thoughts that were coming up with like every brush stroke that I did.
I mean, it is so all of you listening know that I'm not a visual artist, but I think this is very much related or relatable to anyone. So I want to share this with you guys. It's very personal. So I was writing in this journal that I actually got from Kat Popova from the Art Queens. I mean, like this is a all around love fest. And she sent this like journal to me, and I was like, this is going to be my manifestation journal. So I was writing this letter to myself from the future to the present. And I mentioned something like how I have, this really big audience. And what comes up around something like that, and it's kind of like visibility for everyone, especially if you're an artist, because once you're done with the actual artwork, it like you have to cut the cord with it. It goes out into the world. And as much as we want to control where it goes, there's only so much of that control that we do have. And so criticism comes up, right? So when I was thinking about my visibility, it came up for me so hard. I was like, well, what if somebody disagrees with me? And all of these things. And yes, you are right. We talk to ourselves in such a mean way. If we had a friend who talked to us the way that we talk to ourselves sometimes, they wouldn't be friends with us anymore.
Totally. Yeah, I know. I was surprised to make conscious like the scathing like remarks that were like crossing through my head, like, yeah, very harsh. Yeah. And they come from somewhere usually, like whether it's like our parents, which a lot of time it is, of course they meant the best and everything, but like we run into things growing up and we interpret them in whatever way. Or sometimes it's other experiences in our life, like teachers. Another assignment in the book is to like write a letter. Actually, I know people who found this really useful, and for me it was really useful. So to maybe if there's like a particular instance that we can think of, like for me, I remember I had like a teacher who like, I don't even remember right now, like exactly what she said, but it was very like harsh, about my art, and of course in the moment, I didn't tell her like, you're wrong, you know, and I didn't stand up for myself in any way. And so I kind of internalized it. Like, even if I sort of disagreed, I sort of like internalized it, and it started to become really hard to paint. All of these things, if we don't like process them, I find they start to make almost a block. At least that's how it was for me. So I ended up writing a letter to her and standing up for myself, like saying like, no, by the way, this and that and this and that, all the things we didn't say in the moment. And I've heard from other artists too that can be like super useful, because of course in the moment we're being like, rational members of society. We don't like tell them everything we're thinking or whatever, but this way we can at least tell ourselves what we really like think.
Now, Kristy, are you going to send this letter?
No.
Right. And this is
No.
this is a letter we're going to keep to ourselves.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh. And if do you mind sharing something that you put in that letter that you think would resonate with the artist listening?
Oh, I wish I could remember actually. I actually am not completely remembering, because like I don't remember. I didn't write about this in the book, this particular instance, so I'm having a hard time remembering what specifically she had said. And it was like 10 years ago or so that I actually did this whole letter writing thing. So unfortunately I'm forgetting, but I do remember that I disagreed with her, and in my mind, in my heart, and I didn't do that like out loud. So in the letter, I was like explaining
Yeah.
directions.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so, so much. And thank you for sharing that with us. And that exercise is in the book.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, amazing. Okay. And I want to just share one other thing. I had because I went to school, you went to school for fine art, right? To become an artist. And I went to school for art history to become an art historian, a curator, a connoisseur. And I can tell you that throughout my entire academic career, I've always had more than one professor who was so jaded and had this really negative worldview about the art world. And one of those worldviews was, oh, it's hard to get a job in the art world.
Sure, I have had that. That's very common, totally. And
And
they tell us that as if it's a fact. And I remember when my teacher told the whole class that as if it was a fact. And I was like, it's funny. I'm actually a full-time artist right now, putting myself through college. Like, I'm having a hard time relating with what you're saying.
bingo. Yeah, I when I was in grad school, I already started working kind of very much full time in the art world, and I also had the same thought, but I added another. I'm like very empirically minded, so like if there's anything that's quantitative, I like grab onto it, and I was thinking, wait a minute, the numbers don't make sense that it's hard to get a job in the art world because there's literally tens of thousands of institutions in the world that are art related. Then there's room for everyone in every capacity. And on top of that, we can create our own business.
Totally. I feel like there's even more opportunity now than ever before. And there was always opportunity, but now we can like, yeah, create exactly our own business and we can like do a lot of it online and yeah, become, there's different parts to it too. Like there's the making art part and there's the like making money part. And they can, they can be like multiple facets. Like there's different ways to make money too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's always good to have more than one stream of income, no
Yeah.
matter what business you're in, right?
Yeah.
And I always think of kind of like your business, what you put on the table is supported by four legs, right? So,
Well, yeah, definitely. And maybe it's even more important for an artist because I've always like wanted my creative process to have a lot of freedom. So although I do sell my paintings in galleries and everything like that, I really want to have those other streams of income so that I feel creatively free and it's not like I'm trying to like,
mhm.
yeah, paint something that will sell. They do sell, but I want to be like not thinking about that when I'm painting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, relieve the pressure. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure some people work really, better under pressure. Some people prefer not to have pressure. I personally prefer not to have pressure. So I resonate with that.
I like sometimes having pressure of an exhibition looming in front of me, and that helps me like finish a painting, but not the pressure that I'm like, I need to paint something that's gonna sell, what's sellable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Kristy, tell me a little bit more about this book because you kind of have this like holistic approach, right? It's not just what we've been talking about, like these mindset kind of like mental blocks, right? Or self-imposed limiting beliefs. But it's also you talk about technique, you talk about marketing, you talk about my elevator pitch that I'm so freaking honored to be mentioned and quoted in your book.
It's
Thank
so
you.
good. And I feel like it really brings the book together because that's sort of towards the end. So yeah, to answer your question, well, because for me, I had been like blocked for a long time. We've talked about this on other episodes too. And then I kind of almost like divinely downloaded the like a list of things that I would do every day. And I did it as a 21-day challenge. And it basically makes up like the 5-step framework that I created for myself around how to find your voice as an artist. And it is very holistic, like you say, that's actually a really good word for it. So it's like clearing our artistic blocks, using like drain writing, or, getting conscious about these things like we've been talking about already, and then creating the habit of painting every day, or whatever our creative practice is, drawing, sculpting, whatever, for 25 minutes a day, and creating that habit of it. Because initially we might think we should like wait till we're inspired to like paint, but the more we paint, the more we gain inspiration. So it's important to just stay in it every day, even for just little bits of time. And a lot of people look at my work and my output and think I'm really prolific, but actually I really just paint for 25 minutes every day, sometimes more for sure, but a lot of the time it is literally 25 minutes a day. But doing that every day adds up and keeps me like engaged. And then we start to get epiphanies, which is another piece of the framework, like getting sort of opening yourself to epiphanies and understand, like waiting for these sort of like creative insights, and then trying them out, being open to that. And sort of bringing a sense of play in that way. So working more intuitively, which is another thing I talk about in the book. And then there's the aspect of understanding how your work fits into the art world as a whole, which is actually where we start to get towards the end of the book, and more about our career and launching a successful art career. And that's where the elevator pitch that I pulled in of yours really brings it all together. Because once we understand, take some time to understand what we're doing with our work and how it fits into the bigger picture of what people are doing, we need to be able to like explain that to people. And I really love your quote in the book that like an elevator pitch, this is basically your quote, is like a quick and easy way for you to describe your work so that whoever's listening understands it and remembers it. And having this like concise way to talk about your work, which you and I have worked together at for myself, and it's so valuable. I don't know if I should say it or you should say it, but there's sort of 3 pieces to that. Do you want to tell us more about it?
I mean, I guess.
Yes.
I have to tell you, Kristy, I am so grateful to you for pinpointing the importance of the elevator pitch and kind of um it the kind of like the uniqueness of this formula and how critical it is, because I was just teaching it for years thinking like, this is actually, this is what I've been doing, this is it. But then you're like, actually, this is really helpful. This is really something to focus on. And so I started to really, I've always focused on this when I worked with artists, but now I know that it's like my jam, right? The elevator pitch. So the elevator pitch, why it's important, Kristy explained, is because it helps people reiterate your story, like tell your story to someone else. And I think of these scenarios where, like, let's say some gallery director is scrolling past your work on social media and falls in love with it, or a collector, or someone, you know, someone's sister scrolls past it and falls in love with it, and that someone is a major collector. We are natural storytellers as humans, and we want to share that story, right? Whatever we hear. So if someone falls in love with your work and they say, "Oh my gosh, I found Kristy and she paints these gorgeous flowers and these magical landscapes," and they're going to think about the last painting or the last image of magical flowers, or, a gorgeous landscape, or gorgeous flowers on a magical landscape, and they're not going to think about your work. And they're going to either want to look at it and then maybe be sort of like disappointed because they're like, wait a minute, it's not what I was thinking it was, right? It's kind of like just, and I love to over explain, so just bear with me here, but I was recently at a restaurant and I was like, "Hey, do you have any like non-alcoholic sparkling wine?" And they brought over this sparkling wine that's non-alcoholic, and I tasted it and I made this really a weird face because I was like, "This tastes nothing like sparkling wine." But then when I took a second sip, I was like, "Wait a minute. This tastes incredible. It's like sparkling tea or something, and it's got this like bitterness to it. It's so good." It's just not sparkling wine, right? So don't tell me it is. So that's the point of the elevator pitch, is to be very clear about what your work is without making somebody else think that it's something else. And so the formula for it, right? The formula is you want to tell people why you do what you do or what you're interested in, right? Um, then how your perspective informs your work, and then what you do, right? So that is the core of the elevator pitch. That's the formula.
So good. And often it's the why that's left out, or our perspective. Like I started to also like tell the people that I was working with about this. And when we work with it, and I'm sure, oh, well, no, I had you on the call. You were working with them. Anyways, what happens is we want to hide the personal piece, like our perspective, and that's the piece that'll make people like really connect with us and our work. But it's, it's the piece that will like otherwise kind of hide if we haven't like decided that we're going to reveal it.
Yeah. There's also, if we look at the historiography of more contemporary art, like from the 1980s on, there was kind of departure from looking at the biography of the artist. People were like, well, we should look at the art and the context of the art and not the biography. And so in in academic settings, we're taught to remove the biography from the art.
That's interesting because it's definitely a little different from an artist statement for sure. Like, but that's what makes it more relatable when we're talking to human beings.
Mhm.
Feel like we're like blabbering out some academic artist statement that goes over their head. They feel like they can actually understand what we're talking about.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so and that's how galleries sell your work, right? That's how museums decide who gets the show, because it's relatable. And there's this incredible economy of all of this, because museums also, if they're showing contemporary work, they have um, a mission towards the demographic that surrounds the museum, the people that are in the area of civic engagement. And so the way that they engage you with the work is usually by making sure that it's relatable to you somehow.
Well, that's interesting because also from a perspective of being an artist who's always looking for opportunities, that means because I always learn something from you every time I talk to you, that hypothetically,
Likewise.
when we go into a museum and we read these things, we could sort of in the background of our mind, although it's probably put on their website, interpret what their mission is so that if we're ever pitching to them, we could gear it towards that.
Yeah, totally. I digress a little bit from your book, but an example of this is there's an artist that I worked with, still kind of work with. She's, got her training wheels off, and she's, speeding right along. And she came to me when she was like 70 years old and just started to become an artist. And that was maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. And she was like, "Well, my mom lived till 100, so I think I'm
Oh,
good for another few
yeah,
decades."
definitely.
And she's like, "Well, I'm gonna start my art career." And we think about these museum shows, we think about these big giant museum shows, but you don't need to go straight to the MoMA. You can
Yeah.
have a museum show anywhere. And what she did was she pitched a museum show the right way, right? To in like a very subtle way, but it worked, to a museum that was regional to where she lived, that shows contemporary work sometimes, but the mission of her work very much connected to the history of the area. And so in that way, it was a no-brainer for the museum.
Amazing. That's exactly what I was starting to think there's another artist out there. I don't know if I should name him right now, but we want to pitch like a 2-person show to museums. So that's why this
Uh-huh.
rattling around in the back of my brain, like how to best do that. So this is
Uh,
good.
hey,
Yeah.
it's all about civic engagement. Just keep
Yeah.
thinking about that because,
Yeah.
with museums, um, something that's really crucial to them is getting their funding from any like government organizations or whatever. And their funding, if they're a nonprofit museum, it's very much connected to their ability to engage the public around them through their public programming, through their education, through education department, through their exhibitions.
Well, that's very interesting. One day I'm gonna have to pick your brain about how I feel like my work is so magical and surreal. I'm trying to think about how I would like sway it to be like, no, it's about the civic engagement locally. But maybe I'll pick
Well,
that one day over dinner, or if you have any ideas now. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I mean, I wonder if it's fun for people to listen to this. But maybe it is because, it's you might want to think like, well, why does the MoMA feel like they can put up a Dolly show, right? Because they can tie an education program to the Dolly show that maybe expands the perspective of the like school kids coming to see the show. And, that's one way to do it. It doesn't have to be super literal.
Oh, that's very, yeah, I totally see what you mean there. It doesn't have to be like something that occurred locally, like last week is like related to my show or whatever.
No,
Yeah.
it has to be
Yeah.
of interest to and
Yeah.
of benefit and of interest to the surrounding demographic.
That is so good. Well, I hear my friends, artists, very talented ones, very successful ones, very often telling me that they're like planning on working with you. And this just goes to like show, why they would, even as a very,
Oh my gosh.
just want to grow. So that's good.
I, you
Yeah.
guys, I could talk about this for hours too.
Me
And
too.
Kristy, it's like so fun to talk to you about it. Just so you guys know, before we even started recording the podcast, we talked for like half an hour about everything. So when I said hi to you and I started rolling, I was like, it's kind of, I don't know, this feels deceptive. I've been talking to her for a half hour. But anyway, so Kristy, back to your book. I want to ask you this. If you could give our listeners 3 major takeaways from the book that they might have, what would they be?
Ooh, well, I'll just say the ones that people have told me resonated the most with them. I mean, I would say first, like to develop a habit of painting for 25 minutes a day or whatever your art form is. For me, it's painting. So I automatically say painting, but I can't stress the importance of that enough. I know it sounds like really basic, but it's so doable. And so many of us as artists, whether we're full-time artists or, have another job on the side, we still have so many other things to do. And 25 minutes a day makes it really practical to just keep engaged. It's my number one suggestion. I actually am just, this has changed my life. And then the next one would be like creating a sketchbook of ideas that are called thumbnails. So just teeny quick little sketches. I would do one at like every day. Yeah, little like say 2 inch by 3 inch sketches, loose gestural like scribbles of sort of ideas to just get that rolling. And then eventually you'll have a sketchbook full of ideas. And so you'll never be like without an idea, and the ideas roll more and more the more you kind of like engage with it. And then the next, I would say like to do intuitive paintings, and I have some videos on my YouTube channel about intuitive painting, but basically just getting, some practically like kids paper and kids paints or whatever, and just doing your first thought, and just getting into the like habit of following your intuition in this way, and like hearing your first thought and not judging it and doing it. And in the intuitive painting process, even letting go of the idea of trying to make good art. But what it does is over time, it makes us more connected to our intuition. And we'll find that as we're working on like our finished paintings, ideas will come to us and we'll hear them. And often for me, it's kind of like a question like, I wonder what would happen if I did this. And it might be like a reoccurring question, like, I don't know why I'm still thinking about this, but I keep wondering what would happen if I tried this. And a lot of the time when we follow those impulses, it's the thing that'll just take our work from good to great, like my books talks about.
I love that so much. And Kristy, I also want you to know, I mean, you've been listening to my podcast too, I'm sure, but we talk about all the spirituality on here. We are out of the broom closet, so to speak. So I wanted to ask you if you could give us some uh, m- way, like if you could unapologetically speak about art and spirituality right now, what would you tell us?
Well, for me, what actually comes to mind is Elizabeth Gilbert, the way she talks about creativity, as I guess the ancient Greeks conceived of it as sort of like a genie, like an almost like a elf, or some entity that's like guiding our spirit, our practice. And so I just love the way she like talks about it. So that's why the 25 minutes a day is so important, because it's kind of like we're just letting our creative, like our genie, I think she calls it, kind of have the reins, like, and so we show up, and then our creative genie kind of like creates the work, and the more we like let that creative genie kind of move through us, and like so many artists talk about this experience of feeling like the work is actually coming through us, it's not us, so connecting to that other thing. And I also love how Elizabeth Gilbert talks about it. She's like, let the record show that I showed up for my work. If it's not that good, it's because my creative genie isn't that good. So it kind of like takes us a little bit away from, I don't know, the ego of being an artist, and instead just
Mhm.
connects us to the great divine that moves through all of us.
Yeah, you know, this summer I curated your incredible triptych planetary into an exhibition on the topic of the feminine divine. And the more I got the chance to, the more time I got to spend with that painting, the more I recognized I almost felt like you were channeling, right? You were channeling from the beyond, from who knows where, into this painting. Everything was just coming to you. And even sitting here, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you can see Kristy's background is one of her paintings as well. Everything is channeled and it's just coming to you. I guess maybe you're like in this meditative state and it comes to you and you do it. And I want to ask you what you do to get into that state.
Well, it is so much, this painting for 25 minutes a day. Like the more we're in it, the more it comes to us. So, and being open to like hearing these questions that cross through our mind, and knowing that they might be like serious questions, like not just some stupid idea, like something that we
Yeah.
should actually follow and try out. Yeah, so I think those are the two main things, kind of following our intuition and having a habit of a creative daily practice that opens us up to let the spirit move through us.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah. And what would you say to any artists who are feeling like they're not connected to spirituality at all? And they're like, well, maybe they don't think that painting or making is connected to spirituality.
Well, that's actually totally fine too. Like, I don't need to like convince anyone. It's also a very practical thing. Like, if you're painting for 25 minutes a day, for example, if anyone's watching the YouTube video, but I'll describe the image as well. I do have this painting behind me, and it was very complex, and my intuition was guiding me on what to do. So I didn't know what to do on it, say on day one. Like, I didn't know what it was going to become. But by coming to my practice, like for 25 minutes every day, there was always at least one area of the painting that I knew what to do. So I would like, work on that, like there was always, say, like finish a flower or like paint a cloud. Like it's just 25 minutes. And the more I filled in those blanks, eventually the big question marks, like there's kind of a mystical creature on the left side in the shadows in the painting that I'm describing. and I had no idea how to treat this creature. But over time, after filling enough blanks of the others, I started to kind of know what to do with that creature. So it's also very practical. So for anyone who doesn't, you don't have to believe that like spirit is moving through you. It still is, but
Yep.
yeah,
It's kind of like when I do feng shui, somebody, I'll come over someone's house and they're going to be like, well, my husband doesn't believe in it or whatever. And I'm like, he doesn't have to believe in it for it to work.
yeah, exactly. And maybe they'll come to believe the more that they just like show up, but they don't need to believe. It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, Kristy, thank you so, so much. And, I ask pretty much every guest on this podcast, what is your astrology? Do you know your sun, moon, and rising sign?
Oh no, I have it written down somewhere. I am a Taurus. I know that for sure, but one day I'll have to get you to tell me my moon
All
and
the
rise.
deets. Okay, we'll look it up later. And then, Kristy, as art aside, what are some of your favorite things to do, like on your day off?
But I don't know if I have that many days off. I like painting, but I love nature. I like going on walks. I like drinking coffee.
Yes. What is your coffee order?
Well, right now, actually it's decaf. I like to even just have decaf. It still is coffee enough for me because otherwise caffeine it makes it hard to sleep. But I'll get right now just a normal oat milk latte that's decaf, very large. And in the summer I'll get an iced one. Yeah.
I love that, Kristy. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on this pod. And I want to let everybody know that we're going to link the book in the show notes. Also, hold the phone. If this podcast hopefully comes out in time, Kristy has a solo exhibition up right now in New York City. Kristy, wait, before we go, can you just tell us a little bit about your show?
Yes, well, it's through Garvey Simon in New York City, at their gallery space DFN projects in the Upper East Side. So that's 16 East 79th Street. And it'll be up till November 1st. And yeah, it's really exploring like women and magic and sort of esotericism. Yeah, connecting to my interest in magic.
I love it so, so much, Kristy. What else is coming up for you that you want to share with us?
Oh, well, actually, in the new year, I'll be opening my Visionary Artist Master Program 2025. Again, I run it once a year. So, yeah, that will be opening in the new year. I'll actually be sharing a waiting list soon so people can join the waiting list and get a discount when it opens.
Amazing. And where can we follow you? Where can we learn more about you?
So people can follow me on Instagram at Kristy Gordon Art and also on TikTok, although I'm more active on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. And then you can look at my website, just kristygordon.com as well.
And your courses?
Oh yeah, and so right now, by the way, for anyone who wants to pre-order a copy of my book and then receive it on November 5th when it's officially in bookstores, you can go to my Instagram account, click the link in my bio. Actually, we'll probably include this in the show notes as well. And right now, when people pre-order a copy of my book, they'll also get a free online course about color and composition, which is regularly $160. So that would be great to sign up for, get that for free, pre-order the book, and yes.
I love that so much, Kristy. Thank you so, so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to see you here. And yeah, I can't wait to get some caffeine in both of us, or non-caffeine.
Yes, fake caffeine. Thank you so much for having me. It's always so fun to talk to you.
Thank you, Kristy. Thank you so much for listening. Support your community by sharing this podcast, leaving a review, and follow The Artist Advisory on Instagram at @the_artist_advisory, and visit us online at www.theartistadvisory.com.